Hey everyone, in this video we're going to be talking about how floating can help you with stiff muscles and hypertension. So we all know what it feels like to have really stiff muscles, really tight muscles that restrict our range of motion, cause us a bit of pain, but it also leads to hypertension, which is an even bigger problem when it comes to heart disease and stroke and all that kind of stuff. You know, when you have really tight muscles, that's going to increase your blood pressure. And when you have increased blood pressure, that relates to other things like stress and pain and all sorts of things you just don't want to have. So one of the biggest factors in having tight muscles and hypertension is something we do all the time, every day, and that's called sitting. So if you're sitting at work, if you're sitting at home, you're sitting in your car, and a lot of your life is spent just in that one position, not really moving, your muscles are going to atrophy, they're going to tighten in that position, and that's why people feel like they, really need to stretch after sitting for a long time or staying in one position. You hear this thing people say, motion is the lotion, and if you're not walking, if you're not exercising regularly, that's going to cause a lot of tightness throughout our body, and it's not something most of us want to live in. So it might seem a little bit counterintuitive how a float tank could help, because we actually aren't supposed to be moving all that much when we're floating. But there's a couple different reasons why it does help people with relieving muscle tension. And one of those things is the zero gravity environment of the float tank. So when you're floating half in, half out of the water, there's no pressure. The liquid surface of the water isn't pushing back into your muscles as hard as it is, say, sitting in a chair. So when you're lying on your bed, when you're sitting in your chair, when you're just pushing your body against a solid surface, you're really compressing that muscle, and that's what can contribute to that tightness, to that atrophy. When you're in the float tank, whatever position you're floating in, you're in a completely neutral position of where your body wants to be. So a lot of people might notice, if you float with your hands up, you float with your hands down, your body's naturally going to drift into a certain position where it feels like this is where I want to be when I'm not using any energy whatsoever, and there isn't a surface to push back against me. If you're sitting in a chair like in an airplane, that environment is going to restrict your body from moving where it wants to be. So the other component of floating is the magnesium we absorb through the Epsom salts. So even though we call it Epsom salts, there actually is no sodium in the solution. It's magnesium sulfate, and the magnesium we actually absorb through our skin a little bit. And most of us are deficient in magnesium because a lot of our diet does not have this mineral. And when we don't have enough magnesium, that's when we start to cramp more, that's when we start to have more tightness throughout our body. And that's because magnesium is a really important ingredient to the actual relaxation and contraction of our muscles. So that's why you'll hear often doctors telling athletes, telling people who have hypertension issues to take an Epsom salt bath. And that's because the magnesium is something we need to supplement ourselves with if we're not getting enough of it. So that's why a lot of people, when they come out of the tank, they feel a lot more loosey-goosey. They feel like they can move their body with a little bit more range of motion. They feel like they don't have their shoulders quite tight like this. They feel like they can breathe a little bit more easily. And that's your body telling you we're in a more relaxed position. We can breathe a little bit more easily. We don't have as much pressure throughout our body. And that relates to other areas of our life, whether it be your cardiovascular health for blood pressure, whether it be for pain that you're experiencing. If you've got joint pain, having tight muscles will actually make that worse because it's pulling on those areas. But if you have loose muscles, you're not going to feel that tension as much throughout your muscles and your joints. So keep in mind also, your body and your mind work together. If you've got a lot of stress in your life at work, let's say, that's going to physically manifest in the form of a tight neck, tight shoulders, and not being able to breathe very easily. Vice versa, if you are dealing with a lot of tension throughout your body, that's going to mentally make you feel like you're on edge more. You will feel like little things trigger you and set you off to be more irritated or more angry in general. And that's why when people come float, whether it was for stress relief, whether it was for muscle tension relief, usually they'll find that it helps with both of those things because you can't disconnect the two. So after you come out of a float and you're feeling a lot better, you feel like you have a bit more range of motion, don't let that go to waste. Don't just go sit down again. Go take a walk, go do some exercise, do some stretching. You know, you've regained that range of motion. You've regained this feeling of being able to move around and breathe a little bit easier. Keep that momentum going. Keep trying to feel better on top of the fact that a float just improved your life just a little bit. So muscle tension can come from a bunch of different reasons. You know, if you injured yourself, well, your body's going to restrict the amount of range of motion you have in that area of your body and cause stiffness. If you're sitting too much and being too sedentary throughout your life, that's also going to cause some tightness. If you're working out too hard, okay, that's also going to cause some stiffness throughout your body. So whatever your reasons are, floating can help you loosen that up, give you back a little bit of range of motion, and take away some of that pain. So if you're curious about floating, if you want to book a float, if you want to ask more questions, feel free to give us a call, click the links below, and hopefully we'll see you in soon.